Before I start the meeting, I wish to acknowledge that I live in the unceded, ancestral and traditional territory of the Musqueam, Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And I expect most of you are in the same general areas, but there may be people in other territories, and we acknowledge that. Today we're going to have a joint presentation about places in Holland, the Netherlands, that many of us would not have usually thought to visit. And I'm going to ask the presenters to introduce themselves and to share their screen. So Charlotte and Yannick, could you introduce yourself, and you can share your screen at the same time as you wish.
Okay. Assuming you can see our
Excellent.
screen. Okay. So introductions first, acknowledgement. We are here in Victoria. We're actually in Saanich, just north of Victoria. So we acknowledge that we're on the traditional lands of the Wasanich people, and lucky to be here. This is, I'm Charlotte Johnston. I was a professor in the Department of Psychology, and my husband, Jaap Bijlsma, that funny Dutch name, was a fellow from the Royal College in the Department of Emergency Medicine, and both of us retired and living here in Victoria now. The two pictures on the front just we thought were sort of emblematic of all things Dutch. So the one on the left is Jaap standing in front of a windmill, like you should in Holland. And the one on the right is me holding a little baby lamb, like you should in Holland. They're just the sweetest things. More about sheep later. Okay. It makes me nervous for you. Why this topic? Paul has already mentioned Jaap is Dutch. He grew up in Holland. He came to Canada 86, and we moved to Vancouver. So we've been back to Holland frequently. It's where there's still lots of family, lots of friends, and so on. And we were thinking about places that we've seen in Holland, and our assumption was that most people, certainly many people in this group, if not all, would have seen the bigger cities, Amsterdam, The Hague, Utrecht, maybe Alkmaar. But we've had the fortune of seeing lots of smaller towns and attractions. We're actually going to talk about 11 different little towns that we've stayed in or visited, that each have something unique and wonderful to see. So we thought we'd just touch on them with a bit of history and a bit of Dutch traditions. Two traditions here on this slide. On the left-hand side is Jaap indulging in delicacy. These are fresh herring. This is a big deal in the spring. They bring the herring in on the boats. They're just kept in brine, and then you just eat them like that. I don't partake, but apparently it's the most wonderful thing in the world. The picture on the right shows, this was taken at the end of June probably in The Hague, I don't remember exactly, but if you see a house that has a flagpole or any kind of pole outside that has a backpack attached to the top of it, that means that someone in the house just graduated from successfully completed their high school exams and graduated from grade 12. So it's wonderful when you walk around that week, you see all these houses with these backpacks hanging out in the front yard.
Lots of very proud people.
Lots of proud people, you're right. Okay, over to you for the first town.
The first town that we're going to visit is a town named Zutphen. On the maps, we've made Amsterdam blue, and the big red blob is the town that we're talking about. It's about an hour east of Amsterdam. This is one of the smaller cities that we'll talk about. There'll be some mid-sized cities as well. The cities were chosen based on it's either places that I've lived or frequently visited over my life. Zutphen is a 9th century city. It acquired city rights in 1195. And City rights in Holland, it's a big thing. Originally, like any country in Europe, things were extremely feudal organized, and so once a city was able to become independent of feudal reign, they acquired their own legal system, they were able to mint their own coins, they had a variety of economic privileges, and so it was a big thing for a town to become a city. This city is one of the many Hanseatic cities in Europe, and the Hanseatic Association started in the Middle Ages throughout Europe, where cities and towns realized that it was better to work together and to formally arrange trade together, and it essentially became a way to organize trade in a fair way, to be protective and supportive of each other. Zutphen is one of the oldest cities in Holland. It dates back to the 9th century, and it is surrounded by two rivers. It is associated, both sides of the city has, one is the IJssel River, the other one is the Berkel River, very important in the trade for this town. It's a beautiful city, it's great to walk in, it's got very, very car traffic, and this is an example of what you could see, and this is a part of the original defensive wall dating back to the 14th century. And this is actually part of a water gate over the Berkel River. It's restored now, but it's quite beautiful. Zutphen itself is called the City of Towers, and there's two examples of it. On the left you have what we call the Walburgis Church, dating back to 11th century. And one of the claim to fame of this church was that in the 1560s, one of the first public libraries in Holland was started there. It was very popular, it was accessible for everybody, but books kept disappearing, and so eventually the books were put on chains, so this is the first public chain library in Europe. On the right hand side is a tower not associated with any church. It was part of the original fortifications of the city. It's called the Drogenapstoren, and there's a separate story associated with it. I will not go into that, but it was part of the city defenses, and there was a trumpeter and town crier who would warn of the dangers approaching the city if necessary. Couple of things that you can find in this town amongst the many things. Many cities, and I'll touch back upon this later, had housing for the infirm and the elderly, and so this is an entrance gate. Typically the entrance gate to these little neighborhoods were very beautifully decorated, and inside there was social housing for people who were not able to care for themselves anymore. On the right-hand side is an original citizen hall dating back to the 1300s. Later became city hall and law courts, and now is essentially a place for public gatherings, speeches and music and so on. But it's completely restored in its original fashion. A little background to Zutphen. Zutphen had a lot of fires throughout its existence, and the big ones were in 1284 and later in the 1500s. And two bright guys got together, they opened a little store, and they instituted the first fire insurance company in the Netherlands, called the 1845 Insurance Company. And nowadays it's known as the Nationale Nederlanden, which is a big insurance company worldwide. Last thing about Zutphen. It's a town where I lived for a few years when I was preschool. This is a shot of the downtown area with the open market and a tower called the Winehouse Tower. It is part of a former drinking establishment. The building at the bottom was also a trade center and later on law courts. It has a carillon dating back to 1644, which still chimes every day on the quarter hour. When I was little, my mum would take me on the back of her bicycle to the open market, and we would always wait until I at least had heard the carillon once. So these pictures bring back great memories for me.
Okay, on to our next city. Not city, small town, Dokkum. So north of Amsterdam, you can see from the map, Dokkum sits on the, what have you done now?
Sorry, you have to do it this way.
So go
Sorry.
Okay. Dokkum is in the province of Friesland. It sits on the banks of the IJsselmeer. The IJsselmeer was part of the Zuider Zee, the bay of the North Sea that came in, and over time it silted up, and then eventually the Dutch government itself in the 1930s built a dike across it, the Auslau dike, and so it's now just a lake, or the IJsselmeer rather than the Zuider Zee. But this is where Dokkum sits. It's now a very small town. There's about 3,400 people that live there. This shot is of one of the canals that comes into the city. Maybe I'll get you to fast forward because I don't know what's happened. Okay. This was built originally 1,000 years ago on a terp, or a little hill, which gave it access to being able to see farther and to control things. The locks were built in the 16th century and provided the gateway from Holland to the Northern Sea. The gates were originally owned by a monastery that was up on the terp, and they controlled the locks and were able to charge trade boats coming and going. The 17th and 18th century are considered the golden age of Dokkum. It was a huge industrial city, very, very busy. It had coming and going of trade. It also had brick factories, all kinds of mills, seashell and limestone factories, and shipbuilding, and so on. And then in the 19th century, the Zuider Zee began to silt. It became eventually unpassable for large boats to reach it any longer. And as a consequence, Dokkum has kind of faded away in terms of being an industrial or a trade center. The only sort of remnant of the big shipbuilding industry that was there, there's currently a big yacht building industry. So the big buildings that you see behind the locks here are all designed to outfit huge luxury yachts around. Dokkum's also making a comeback as a tourist destination. In fact, when we stayed there, we stayed in a little tourist house close to the beach. It has a growing water sports industry, sailing, water skiing, kite surfing, and so on. And it's surrounded by a number of very large nature reserves. So there's very nice hiking, bird watching, that kind of thing. The picture here shows the beach, and then all of the little white things that you see bobbing are actually swans out on the IJsselmeer. And they're there pretty much, hundreds of them, and they're there pretty much every day, at least in the spring season. So a very nice little town to wander around.
Great bakeries.
And great seaside. So you can, if you're looking for a beach, Dokkum has a reasonable beach.
The next town that we're going to talk a little bit about is a town called Hindelopen. We're going to stay in the province of Friesland. It's about an hour and a half by car from Amsterdam. Hindelopen is again a Hanseatic city, so very rich as a result of trade in the 17th and 18th century. From Hindelopen, trade actually went more north towards England, the Scandinavian countries, and the Baltic Sea. Exporting wool and gin were big, understandable from Holland probably. The city was extremely wealthy, developed its own language, as well as a very distinct art style. It is part of the 11 City Skate Tour, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. This is on the left side, the picture. There's in front of one of the many art studios that the town has, is a sculpture in the water, appropriately somebody's legs with wooden shoes on it. Hindelopen is on the IJsselmeer and therefore also behind or partly behind the dikes. The dikes are, most of Holland, as we know, is under the water level and therefore is behind dikes. Typical dike is about 8.5 meters in height. And there's a big project going on to elevate these dikes as a result of the rising sea levels. A classic picture of any dike in Holland is that you'll see sheep. Sheep have two functions, well, several functions, but the two main ones are keeping the grass nice and tidy so that the structure of the dike itself is well preserved. And the vibration of their little hooves scares away rats and moles and other vermin that potentially can affect the stability of the dikes. It's a beautiful little town, very small, not accessible by car. You can walk and bike there. It's very pleasant. We were very lucky. It was spectacular weather. The picture on the left shows Main Street with its own tower at the back. On the right hand side is a more modern public playground with still very traditional brick patterns. And just behind me on the right hand side is one of the more classic houses in Hindelopen. Hindelopen has a bit of a funny history. It has what we call captain's houses, and the house behind me on the previous picture is a captain's house. And captain's house is a house where during the winter month the whole family and the captain will live there. But during the summer, when the captains leave on their trade missions, the house is empty and the family moves to a smaller house, typically in the backyard. Probably just to stay warm. You don't have to warm or master a whole house, and so there's lots of these little houses there. This is City Hall, later the law courts, dating back to the 1500s. And on the right hand side is an example of the very traditional Hinderloper art that is still. There's a lot of it around. It's quite attractive, we find.
Okay, the next one. This is my favorite, Franeker. Same area back up in Friesland. I'm going to let you fast forward the slides. A little bit bigger town, about 13,000 people. Very old, like they all are, founded in 800. For a while, it had the second oldest university in the Netherlands. I say for a while because the university actually closed in the 1800s. The oldest university is in Leiden, but this was the second oldest one. And it had a number of luminary folks who studied there. William, Prince of Orange, Peter Stuyvesant, René Descartes studied there, and Isa Eisinger, who I'm going to tell you about in a minute. Do you want to talk about this thing
maybe
later?
Yes. Yeah, we'll do the 11 City Skate part later on.
It doesn't start and finishes here? No. We'll talk about it then later. Never mind. So, and on the left are older astronomical tools, telescopes and so on, and they were used by Isa Eisinger. If you fast forward, in this little town, the highlight is the Royal Isa Eisinger Planetarium. This man, he was a wool carder by trade, that's what he did, but he was an amateur astronomer. He was very interested in astronomy. He studied a little bit at the university, sort of part-time, taught himself, used the tools that were available then in terms of telescopes and so on. And between 1774 and 1781, he transformed the living room of his house into a working model of the solar system. It still functions. First of all, I have to point out, this is the living room of their house. So behind the woman standing in the picture is the guide for the who explains things to you. And behind her are these little rooms with sleeping chambers and their closets and so on. I don't know how his wife felt about this endeavor, but he just took over their whole house and built a model of the solar system. You can see on this, well, let me tell you, first of all, this is still functioning, and it is the oldest continuously operating orrery or functioning solar system model in the world. It's been made a UNESCO World Heritage Site and so on. The next set of pictures show the ceiling in a little more detail. The suspended gold ball that you see is the Earth. The sun is painted on the ceiling, and then all around you can see painted the astrological signs as well as all of the dates and times. And then on the walls in the background are more information and positions of different planets and so on. The upstairs from the living room, so above this, are the workings of how the system keeps track of where everything is in the solar system. It's run by a pendulum clock that needs to be, wound every 2 or 3 days. The model is to scale, so a millimeter is 1 million kilometers. So he worked this all out. He used over 10,000 little nails to make the gears, to make it go around. The only thing, it never had Pluto on it because Pluto hadn't been discovered yet, and good thing because Pluto would have had to be way out in the backyard if it was to scale. So, but it's quite remarkable to see.
And it's super accurate. It needs to be adjusted by a few minutes once so many months. And it will show you time, year, and everything.
Position of the solar. It's an incredible thing to see. Yes. And that he just did it in his spare time.
In his living room. And his marriage survived.
Yeah.
Staying in the north, again in the province of Friesland, we're going to visit a town called Leeuwarden. Leeuwarden is the capital of the province of Friesland. It's a mid-size city of around 127,000 people. Early settlements dating back there actually to the 2nd century, and it had its formal documented inhabitants in the 10th century. It's again one of the 11 city skating tour cities. And essentially the 11 city skate is a skating tour that comprises of 11 cities in Friesland, 1,200 kilometers in length. It only can be held if the ice over all the canals and lakes is 6 inches or more. There have actually only been 15 of these tours since 1909. The last one was in 1997. If it's going to happen, the whole of Holland gets very excited. We get 11 city fever. And if the race happens, it's a national day off so that everybody can either watch the skaters live or watch in front of the TV and see this event from happening. Couple of things in Leeuwarden that we found there. On the left-hand side is a monument for the people that survived the hunger winter in 1945 or 1944, I have to say. And it was not unusual for people in those days to go on their bicycle, to leave town either to go to other towns or cities and live there for as long as they could, or they would go out and get food and brought it back on their bikes, and this is a memorial to that. On the right-hand side, a classic, what do you call it? Manhole cover. With in the center a depiction of a tower, and we're going to talk about this tower a little bit. Leeuwarden is again beautiful city, very walkable, very few cars in the city, and these are just a couple of little examples of what you can find there. On the left, a way house. The way house dates back to kind of the 14th, 15th century. It was a place where trade could happen and where there was a standardized scale, so that the trading of butter, milk and meat, that there was no cheating allowed. On the right hand side, a building, now a museum, but a formal royal residence. William IV of Orange spent some time here there, and it was last inhabited by the royal house in the 1700s. There's a couple of notables from Leeuwarden, M.C. Escher, whose art we all know, and Mata Hari originally came from there as well. This is the tower that we saw on the manhole cover. It's called the Oldehoven Tower. Originally built beginning in 1529, and after a few years they realized that the tower was actually leaning unintentionally, and they tried in a variety of ways to counteract that. On the right hand side you see some attempts where they kind of put extra layers in to kind of bring more support, but the tower kept leaning more and more, and currently it actually leans more than the Tower of Pisa. Before the Tower of Pisa was righted a little bit. It was meant to be part of a church, which was never built in the end because of the leaning of the main tower. The tower was supposed to be 120 meters, but they stopped after 39 meters, and a steeple was never put on top of it. One of the beautiful things in Leeuwarden, on Ascension Day every year there's a flower market, and this is just a small snapshot of throughout the city. There's fresh flowers, all in pots, and people come over from all over Holland to buy their their plants to be potted in their own yards, and it's absolutely breathtaking how beautiful it is.
The flower market is also, there's a big auction. It was really fun to watch them auctioning off plants.
Right.
How many did you want to buy? How many hundreds did you want to buy? All right, onward. This is the smallest town that we'll talk about, yeah. Midwolde. Midwolde is very near Groningen in the north, and so we stayed there a couple of times because it's close to family and close to Groningen, but not in the city itself. Midwolde is tiny. There's 185 people officially live there. As I said, it's near Groningen. Its most notable aspect is its church. There was an estate, the estate is still there, but at the time the church was built, it was really commissioned by the Nienoord estate, which is close, and was, from what I can tell from history, almost functioned as the family's church that they let other people go to as well. The first part of the church, the oldest part of the church, the nave, was first built in the 12th century. It's full of incredible tombs and artwork. The cemetery itself is incredible to see, and is still a functioning church and a functioning cemetery. There's still a little bit of space left. Just two more pictures. The one on the left is the steeple. And then as you enter the church, first of all, just to mention, so this was close to where we were staying, the Airbnb that we had. And so it was part of my daily walk. I would walk, and the church was always open. There was never anybody there. but there was always the welcome sign outside, and the church was open. You could go in, wander, look at anything, read anything you could, wander the cemetery. It was wonderful to be able to see that. On the next slide is a close-up on the left of the altar at the front, which is really phenomenal, this big, huge marble sculpture. It was commissioned as the tomb of the matron of the Nienoord estate and sculpted by Verhulst, who was a famous sculptor of the area. But we all know. But when you get up close to it, the detail and the beauty of it is really astounding. Turn around and see the organ at the back of the church, which is also lovely. And then just as you wander around, there's this, I love this plaque that has what I'm assuming is the plaque of of the Groningen province, probably, I'm not sure, dates from 1729. And on the right, one of the books that's on display displays some apocryphal texts, so parts of the Bible that some religions include, other religions don't include, and so on. But again, just there if you
can just
happen to want to read a couple of pages.
You can turn the page.
You can. Midwalda, it was also great as I would keep going on my walk. There's some beautiful nature along here. The picture on the left is a sign that's on a little bridge over a canal. I didn't bother to blow it up because, first of all, the sign's written in Dutch, and so you probably couldn't read it. Some of you could not read it. But what I think always amazed me about it when I looked at it was it gives some information about the canal system and what's connected to what. And then it gives the elevation of Midwalda, which is -1 meter. Below sea level. Picture on the right is a stork nest. They've been encouraging the stork population, so they build these high nests. And this was spring season, so there's a mummy stork standing, maybe a daddy stork, I don't know. If you can't really see very well from the picture, but there's at least one baby head peeping out over the nest. So if you're ever in Midwalda, check out the church. It's really cool.
Briefly back in the province of Friesland, a town named Dokkum. Dokkum, again, about probably an hour and 45 from Amsterdam, easy to get there by car. Smallish town, 13,000 people. City rides for almost 1,000 years now. It's the turning point of the 11 City Skate Tour. So whenever on the news, if you would be following this race, you would hear, they are in Dokkum, and then we all knew what was happening. On the left-hand side, some modern art in the center of town. Dokkum is a fortification, and I have to admit the picture on the left was taken from the internet, but it shows the beauty of how these cities were organized. It's again very walkable, very little traffic in the center. And on the right hand side there's a picture of some of the typical houses that you would find along the little canals in town. And in the right bottom there's a large version of a classic Dutch skate, that Frisian Dutch skate that is now used as a place to sit and enjoy the view. Dokkum doesn't have a lot of claim to fame other than St. Boniface arrived there and unfortunately met his demise there. He was an Anglo-Saxon missionary, he was a Benedictine monk, he was a unifier of the Catholic Church in Europe. He was at a rally to convert the Frisians to the Catholic faith, and unfortunately was killed by robbers because they were looking for treasures that he may have carried. He had a lot of books with him, and therefore his statues often are accompanied by him carrying a book or a book in front of him. And this area is still kind of a pilgrimage for Catholics in Europe.
Onward, back up close to Groningen. to Bourtange, which was a star-shaped fort built in late 1500s. It was used until the middle of the 1800s. It served as a control for trading routes between the north of Holland, Groningen in particular, and trade to Germany. And there's a sandy ridge of marshes that run along this area, and so they built the fort to take advantage of those marshes and using them for defense. This is, again, from the internet, an overhead picture of this star shape to the fort and the marshes all around, and they can all be controlled in terms of the amount of water let into the dikes or out of the dikes, and so on. Where are we? Here we go. The star shape to the fort gave it, from a military perspective, it gave it all these strategic lookouts, and the lakes and the moats. You see a mill on the left that is used still to control the water that comes into the moats and can be raised or lowered. And then on the right is, they left a cannon, and so you still stands in the cannon. The inside of the fort is primarily now used as an attraction. There are a few people who still live there, but it's mainly an attraction site, and buildings have been restored to how they were in the 1600s, and stores and so on. Two of the attractions, two of the buildings that we were fascinated by. On the left is the original synagogue from Bourtange. This would have been an Ashkenazi set of Jewish people who lived and worshipped here. They were there since 1842. Unfortunately, they were almost entirely deported and then killed during the Second World War. The synagogue has been revived. It now serves as a community center and a place that promotes knowledge of the life of Jewish people in this area prior to the war. On the right-hand side, the workings of the town's flour mill, the grinding mill in town, which was huge, but very, very well preserved.
Still operational.
Still operational. Yeah, you can buy bread made with flour milled here in Bourtange.
We're going to talk a little bit now about my hometown. Now, I was born in The Hague, but I spent a lot of my life in the city of Groningen. It's the capital of the province of Groningen. It has a population of about 250,000, a quarter of which are actually students. The town was established in 1040, and it became eventually, it was a city-state in the 15th century, very independent of the rest of Holland, and eventually joined the remainder, the Republic, in around 1800. It was a major northern trading center. It's a wonderful city. It is student-driven. This on the left-hand side is a picture of the tower in the city center. We call it the Old Grey One, and you can see it from far outside the town. Student life in the city is important, and on the right-hand side is a picture of this same square in early August. In early August, there's the Student Introduction Week, and all the new students have a fun week with lots of parties, but also lots of education and safety advice and so on. And so the city loves this week, like everybody is very involved with it. In the city center, close to the Martini Tower, is a church called the Martini Church. It's a Gothic cathedral, Protestant, dating back to the 13th century. It has one of the oldest Baroque organs in Europe. It has many tombs and plaques, and they even discovered a few sarcophagi found in the 11th century. This is a beautiful day in Groningen with beautiful views. pictures of the Baroque organ on the left, in the center, some of the many plaques that you can find on the church floor depicting some noble family. And on the right hand side, one of the many sarcophagi that they found there. University of Groningen is my alma mater. It's a public university. It was founded in 1614. It has 35,000 students. Now the remainder of the 60,000 students that this city has are for a variety of higher educational organizations, but the university itself has around 35,000 plus students. It has a few notables. Aletta Jacobs was the first female attending a university in Holland, was the first female physician graduating from this university, and she was a suffragette. Bernoulli, a mathematician, developed calculus, studied here and was a professor there. And lastly, but not least, is Ben Veringa. He was a physician who got the Nobel, and a physics professor who got the Nobel Prize for his work in molecular machines. And of course, I'm another famous notable of this university. One of the things that Groningen has, almost every mid-sized and larger town has a synagogue. But this synagogue in Groningen dates back to 1906. Pre-World War II, there were about 2,800 Jewish people living in Groningen. After the war, decimated to 120. Now a steady congregation of around 250. Unfortunately, the congregation couldn't support financially the use of this building. They moved to a smaller synagogue, and this building for a while, for decades, it actually was used as a laundromat. Officially reopened in the early 1980s, and now is a very active religious and cultural center with an active religious population. I briefly mentioned earlier the social housing in Holland, and this is a classic example in a city. This is the St. Anthony Infirmary, dating back to 1507. Built on the outskirts of the city originally, now almost in the center of the city, was for the care of the poor and the sick. Plague sufferers were housed there in the early 1600s. It functioned as a madhouse for a century and a half, and there was a Sunday spectator sport where people would come and look at the crazies on the weekend. This gives you an idea what the inside looks like with little supportive housing units. It was funded by public money as well as church money, and they had a tremendous function, and I think they were centuries ahead of their time with this. Main train station in Groningen, if you're ever there, go and visit it. It's in very neo-Renaissance style. It's a major end-of-the-line station. It's probably one of the most beautiful stations in Holland, and that's not my words. Underneath the plaza in front of it, there is a place with about 5,000 protected bicycle slots where you can leave your bike during the day and pick it up at the end of the day. The station itself carries about 50,000 passengers per day. It's being renovated, but this is part of the old entrance hall, and it's called La Salle des Pas Perdus, which means the Hall of the Lost Steps. And it was called that way because despite the number of people that could be coming through, the architecture was so that sound would be dampened by the architecture itself. It was also called La Salle des Pas Perdus because the people would be pacing there back and forth waiting for their trains, and so they had a lot of wasteful steps. Last little bit of Groningen, a very controversial building called the Forum was finished in 2019. As you can see, architecturally wise, very different from anything else in the city. It was very controversial, but once it was opened, it became wickedly popular. It's a public space, it's publicly funded. Inside, it's got this very modern architecture with lots of escalators and elevators going all over the place. It's got any floor has beautiful windows looking out of the picture over the city, and it is a place where you can socialize, study, look over the city. It's got public libraries, it's got cinemas, it's got restaurants, and it's a very popular place, and it's now an accepted piece of Groninger architecture.
All right. Second last town, Slochteren, still in the north, just outside Groningen. Can you fast?
Sorry.
It's okay. This is actually a museum, but it was a family estate. There's several of these around Holland, as there are in many European countries, but they're a lovely way to spend a day. The Franeker is the name of this estate. It has been inhabited for over 800 years. Family lineage, it's been in essentially two families over that period of time, so it really changed ownership only once, and then otherwise it's been inherited. It started as a very simple stone farmhouse back in the 13th century, and then as each century passed and each new head of the household did modifications and so on. In the 14th century, it would have been part of the feudal system, and so it was fortified with a tower and moats around it to protect it, and so on. Then in the 17th century, it was renovated again, and this is when the gardens began and started to grow. The original style was French Baroque, and so as you wander through the gardens, you see all these incredible sculptures, Baroque sculptures and so on from that period. In the 18th century, the new head of the household renovated yet again. At this point, they removed the towers and the walls. They were no longer needed for fortification and instead allowed a more open view of the countryside. And they kept the Baroque park, but they added and extended the gardens with much more English style, sort of meandering pathways and low-growing fragrant flowers and so on. The house itself is a museum since the 1970s. It's been operated as a museum. And you can go in, you can wander the gardens anytime, and you can go into the house. There are not guided tours, but well-signed explanations of much of the original furnishing is still there. And there's a wonderful film that shows you the history of the house and interviews the last surviving woman who grew up there. And her family donated the house as a museum. But it's the most touching little film where she talks about running around in the house and the places she would hide in the house and the places she would go in the gardens and so on. So kind of a little piece of living history there. Well worth a day if you're close to Groningen and looking for somewhere nice to see.
And it's out in the middle of farmland.
Yeah.
You have these estates that just kind of happen to be there.
Well, they had the farmland. The farmland was sold off, but yeah.
Last town to visit, another little piece of my childhood. We're going to go south of The Hague, a city called Delft. Delft, established around the mid-1200s, it was the first capital of the 7 Dutch provinces, so just before Holland became a republic. It was the capital, but it wasn't the seat of government. The seat of government was in The Hague. And not until 1814 that Amsterdam actually became the capital of Holland. Delft is also a student city. It's got a technical high school, very famous. And again, like any other Dutch city, so easy to walk around in. It's absolutely stunning. And as a little boy, I would spend on the weekends sometimes. My family, when we lived in The Hague, we would go to Delft to walk around and to have a bite to eat. Delft has two churches. This is called the New Church on the left, which was finished in 1572. The old church dates back to the mid-1200s. The New Church claim to fame is that it's the burial place of William of Orange, who was assassinated there in 1584. And ever since he was first buried there, all successive royal family members, all princes, kings and queens and so on, are buried in this new church. It's a wonderful city with beautiful open restaurants, patios and everything. It's got lovely canals. My great-grandmother had a house along one of these canals, a boarding house in those days. And on the right-hand side is a picture of one of the central squares. On every week there's an open market with wonderful fresh fruit and vegetables and everything. And last but not least, Delft has a number of beautiful squares, and this is one of them. The building behind the square here, behind the patio, is a restaurant named Kobus Kug. And Kobus Kug was a famous establishment that's been there since the beginning of time. My last family member from The Hague was my aunt, my mom's sister. She passed away a number of years ago, but one of her traditional trips in the summer, she would go to Kobus Kug, sit on the patio, have a glass of white wine or two, and ate one of the best apple pies that you could find in Holland. And so whenever we are in Holland, we always go to Delft, we go to Kobus Kug, and we have a glass of wine in honor of my family and have some apple pie.
And that's it.
And
the
that's
11
it.
cities that you may not have seen in the Netherlands.
So thank you very much, Charlotte and Jaap. And would you be able to stop sharing, please? And we'll see if we have any questions.
Yeah,
I think
I just took it away.
Okay. I'm just going to change my screen so I can see everybody. If I can get there. It doesn't work. Beautiful photography. And you should join the photo group at the college.
And most of those are just iPhone
shots.
photographs.
Yeah, but it's beautiful photography anyhow. I was very impressed that someone else liked to take photographs of manhole covers with towers on them. Some of the photographs that I tend to take, so thank you for
Yes, we liked them when you presented them.
Yeah, we thought you'd like that one.
Okay, I'll see if anyone has any questions. I can't get my screen back into gallery view right now for some reason, so I can't see everybody properly. So,
Tineke.
Yeah,
Tineke.
with a very Dutch name. So thank you both. I also grew up in the Netherlands, and I'm using the Netherlands because I grew up in Utrecht and then went to university in Leiden. And it's not surprising that your missed places were not in Holland as such.
That's right.
That's true.
Yes.
So I know this is a question that's often asked of me. What's the difference between Holland and the Netherlands? So Friesland, Groningen, Utrecht, those provinces are not Holland. South and North Holland is where Amsterdam is, Rotterdam, The Hague, etc. So anyways, what struck me, of course, was that you said Groningen had the most beautiful station in Holland. Where Dutch people would cringe because Groningen is not Holland. It's like telling a Scottish person, you're from England. In the Netherlands, a lot of people refer to the UK as England.
That's true.
But a Welsh or a Scottish person wouldn't appreciate that. Anyways, thank you so much. I am very fortunate that I've been to most of the places except for Bourtange. I'd love to go there. And Midwolde I haven't been. And then Slochteren. And maybe you could say also something about Slochteren and the Groningen gas field. Because when I grew up in the 60s, 70s, Slochteren was known for its winning of gas, and it has caused a lot of problems.
Yes. So we need, in the north, in the province of Groningen, in the town of Slochteren, there was a huge gas field underneath. It was essentially exhausted, but as a result, there were large open spaces underground, and as a result, these former gas reservoirs have started to collapse, and that has led to significant earthquakes in Holland, in the northern province of Groningen, and many people have ended up with significant damage to their houses, with cracks in the wall, things falling over. And so there has become this very extensive reimbursement program that was established, and it was very complex to kind of get reimbursed for the damages, but the threshold has become lower and lower. So a relative of mine in the city of Groningen, who lives in a house that's very old and had a crack, as long as I remember, they were able to apply for reimbursement for that crack in the wall because it could have been associated with the collapses of these former gas wells. But it's a big issue in the province, and it continues to be not always front page news, but it's an ongoing issue.
Any other questions, people? Paul Harrison, you have your hand up.
Thank you both for lovely memories brought back to me. I lived in the Netherlands for a year, but it was 35 years ago. But some of the views, and I lived in Zeeland, near a little town called Ierseke. But the views of the dike side and the sheep there, we lived out on a farm outside of town. And many of the people there had never been to Holland, had never been to Amsterdam, never been to the other provinces. That was very rural and quite isolated. And I gather had been islands before some of the connections were made. And we lived just below a dike that had stopped the 1953 flood. And the new dike was almost a kilometer behind our house. So there was a lot of polderland there that had been built in that intervening time. But thank you again. It was wonderful to see parts of Holland I haven't seen. I've been to Leeuwarden, but not to the other towns.
Any other questions or comments?
See, Helen has her hand up, but I don't know.
Helen?
I would like to say that I'm Scottish and not English.
Noted.
Yeah.
What I'd really like to do is encourage people to go to Izinga's planetarium. It's a wonderful place.
Oh, it's just astounding.
This guy could actually do that, so long ago. Definitely a highlight.
Yeah.
For me too.
Helen? I really enjoyed your talk. It made me want to go there. I really thought the details you chose were so interesting to me. So thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Carolyn?
Yeah, I wonder, are all of these places accessible somehow by public transportation, or do you have to have a car?
No, you can, in Holland, public transportation is superb. Like all the bigger towns, they're all via train connections, but there's good bus transport. And if you feel like it, you can go on your electric bike and find your way through the whole of Holland to any town that you'd like to visit. But you don't need a car necessarily.
Yeah, like Midwolde, the littlest place that we stayed.
There's a bus.
There was a bus, and the bus took you to the train into Groningen, kind of thing. Probably 20-minute ride, so it's doable certainly.
We when we stayed outside the bigger cities, we often indeed would take a bus to a train station and from then go into town, just because it was so easy and you didn't have to worry about parking or anything. So no, for sure.
Thank you. It certainly makes me want to go there.
Peter?
Nice talk, and thank you very much for that. And I may have missed this at the beginning, but did you make this part of a single trip? And if so, roughly how long did it take you to visit all these different beautiful towns?
So it wasn't a single trip. We've been to the Netherlands many times over the years because of Jan's family and so on. So this is sort of an assortment of trips, but several of them are from 2 years ago. We spent a month, and a lot of the Friesland towns were from that month trip, and you could easily do it in a week, 2 weeks, with some planning of where you were going to be and so on. So I don't think any of the towns, there were lots of things to do and see, but you could easily see what we presented in a day in any of those towns.
And again, Holland is small, so kind of within the province of Friesland, you could see all those cities if you wanted to do in 2 days, no problem, kind of thing.
Jan, Claire Weeks here. I love listening to your charming accent, which reminds me of the accent of a cousin of mine who grew up in Queens, New York, with me, and moved to Amsterdam right after university and has never come home. And somehow or other, he sounds just like you.
I hope that's a good thing.
It rubs off.
Beverly? You're muted, Beverly.
He's in Weesp. Near.
Beverly, you're muted.
Yeah. Okay, I think you can hear me now.
Yes.
What really impresses me is how organized everything is, and it seems to have gone way back to about the 11th century. Is that the result of cumulative culture, or is it something to do with the environment, with always having the sea on one side?
I think it's an interplay of things, to be honest. I think in order to protect the Dutch people from the ever prevailing water levels, you have to work together. You have to maintain. You have to keep your canals, your sloughs, your ditches. You have to keep it up, because otherwise, sooner or later, your basement will be full of water. I think the cultural, Holland has essentially been part of the Netherlands, sorry, pardon me, has essentially been part of, the Spanish reign, French reign, German reign. I think that Holland has taken over a lot of things that work very well, and I think that the early establishment of a good legal system that they took over from the French, monetary system, trade system, to combine themselves with other cities in Europe. I think that very cosmopolitan or kind of Cosmo-European approach has led to. I think I'm still, I've lived most of my life in Canada now, but I'm still very connected and proud of how the Netherlands have organized themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Any other, Richard?
Well, this is a very short question, but is Holland in the Netherlands, or are they completely separate entities, or which? So Netherlands is the more inclusive, is that correct?
Yeah.
And is Amsterdam in Holland?
No. So yes. So the Netherlands has 12 provinces, and 2 of those provinces are North Holland and South Holland, and Amsterdam is in North Holland, but it's the capital of the Netherlands.
So we would not offend people in Amsterdam by referring to Holland.
That's true.
I mean, I'm going to be there in 6 weeks, so I just thought it would be a good idea to check it.